past few years, there has been a phrase circling the farming community and has become a growing concern for consumers like ourselves. This phrase is sustainable farming. But what does that really mean, and how is it applicable to us as consumers? In order to understand what is going on, we must understand what both of these words mean separately, how they affect each other, and how they can be applied to the farming community with our growing populations. What is sustainability? Sustainability, according to Webster, is the ability to maintain something at a certain rate or level. To put it in terms that more directly affects us, it is the avoidance of the depletion of natural resources in order to maintain ecological balance. So this is keeping the environment, soil nutrients, and understanding how the relationships between organisms affect us and the rest of the world around them. Now, sustainability doesn't only apply to agriculture or the natural world, it also applies to businesses. In order for a business to be sustainable, it has to make operational income. Operational income is money that helps maintain the business as a whole. If nothing else, it has to maintain the business. But what makes a business truly a business is it makes enough money to pay employees and to make investments. In an agricultural environment, this might be a newer tractor or more land. Okay, so now that we know what sustainability is, what is agriculture? Agriculture is the science or practice of farming. Cultivation, so farming is cultivation of soil or crops, and animal husbandry. For those of you who don't know, animal husbandry is the science of breeding and caring for farm animals. So, how do these two affect each other? So, farming and sustainability affect each other in several ways, including the environment, like I mentioned earlier, where the farmer has to continually ask, what impact is this operation making on my direct surroundings and the world as a whole? Ecosystems, if I plow this field, how is this going to affect the animals that are currently living here? Will they be able to move somewhere else? Will they have somewhere to drink? You know, that type of, those types of questions have to continually be on the farmer's mind. But whenever we add these two terms together, it makes things even more complicated than that. How can farmers feed the world while still trying to please the population? Basic economic principles support the idea that essentially the consumer dictates what happens in the market. The US population, or urban population, is currently, or was at about 62.7% during the 2015 census reports. This means that 62% has no space to grow any of their food. They don't have space for a garden or anything. They rely solely on grocery stores. And when people go to the grocery stores, what do they usually want? They usually want something that is affordable and something that's going to be healthy for them, or what we consider to be more natural. So, how are we able to please the consumer while still having a sustainable farm? This boils down to a few basic things that farmers are able to do by making things healthier for the consumers, while also still remaining as sustainable as possible. This is crop rotations, fertilizers, biological pesticides, and chemical pesticides. Now, some of these sound a little scary, specifically the fertilizers and chemical pesticides. A lot of organic farms say that that is not something that they support, but a lot of this can be applied and made into a much more sustainable form. So, rotating crops is done in a fashion sort of like this. This is an example of a 3-year rotation cycle. 1 year, the farmer plants wheat. They plant it in the early summer to mid-fall, or late summer to early fall, and they harvest during midsummer. The next year, they plant during early spring, so a few months later they plant maize, and they harvest mid-fall. They wait a year until the next time it is time to plant wheat. So it is almost an entire year that the field remains fallow. This allows some of the stems and stalks from the previous crops to get broken down in the soil and helps the land rest. This can help maintain some of the common insects. It can help with erosion, if that is an issue, and it can just generally help the health of the land in that area. So, even with a plan like this, something has to make things a little more productive. This is where fertilizer comes in. Take the two crops that we were talking about a minute ago. Wheat and maize. This is also known as grain sorghum. Both of these use some of the 3 basic or most common nutrients: nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. Wheat is in particular very sensitive to nitrogen, while maize uses a lot of all 3. In this order, the maize would need supplemented, especially for nitrogen, because the wheat used some, and now it's needing some. But the stalks are able to put some of that back into the ground during the fallow year. All right, some of the pesticides, so the biological pesticides, one of the biggest causes of crop failure are aphids. They are tiny bugs that latch onto the bottom of the plants and suck the nutrients out, essentially. They can be devastating to crops. But if we're able to put one of their natural predators in, that would be able to help with some of the natural predators would be able to help with the aphid populations without using any chemical pesticides. These would include the green lacewing and the ladybird beetle, also known as the ladybug. These are fairly inexpensive when found on the internet. You can ship them and get several hundred to release into your fields. This is a great idea, but whenever you have a big epidemic of aphids, sometimes you need a little supplement. These consist typically of the pesticides, the chemical pesticides that scare a lot of people. But the EPA, the USDA, and the FDA have all had very strict regulations that farmers must follow in order to be able to apply chemicals to their fields, and they have to put it only in specific quantities at certain times of the year to not affect any populations of wildlife. I hope that I have been able to answer some of your questions regarding sustainable farming. We learned a little bit more about what sustainable farming is, how it works, and how it affects the consumers. I hope we learned a little bit more about the balance and pros and cons of the different aspects of sustainable farming. Thank you.